Welcome to Measures of Truth, a His Dark Materials podcast. I'm Caitin.
I'm Alan.
And I'm Anya, and today we're discussing the second episode of the first season of His Dark Materials, The Idea of North.
This episode was written by showrunner Jack Thorne, who also created Cast-Offs, a parody TV show of Survivor. Tom Hooper returned to direct this episode. He's directed a lot of TV in his career, including the 7-part miniseries John Adams, which aired on HBO.
I recognize that name because he's a character in Hamilton.
That's right.
I was just going to jump in here and actually say that Jack Thorne is also the dude who wrote the screenplay for The Cursed Child, which I didn't realize, or at least I'd known that like months ago and then I forgot. No, he wrote the theater staged Harry Potter thingy that everyone hates.
Right.
Though it should be noted that the actual plot points came up with by J.K. Rowling. He just turned them into a screenplay. So might not be Jack's fault that it sucks. I just thought that was an interesting sort of young adult book series connection.
I don't know any of those people, so I don't have anything to say.
You don't know who J.K. Rowling is?
No.
I'm impressed.
Jack Horn and Tom Hooper. Of course I know who J.K. Rowling is.
John Adams was the second president of the United States.
Really?
How dare you? Yes.
Okay, actually, yes, I remember that song lyric. Okay, yep. Do our listeners know I'm Canadian and not like a doofus? Anyways, it doesn't matter. Mrs. Coulter brings Lyra to her extravagant Art Deco apartment and then to the Arctic Institute for lunch. Lyra wants to help with the search for Roger, but Mrs. Coulter puts her off. The Egyptians find the filthy room where the kidnapped children had been held, but it's too late. They've already been moved. They find a sweater belonging to Billy Costa and bring it back to his mother. Lyra and Pan go to investigate creepy noises they've been hearing at night and see Mrs. Coulter's monkey demon venturing too far from her body to be normal. The Magisterium sends 2 officials to talk to Mrs. Coulter about problems with the General Oblation Board. Too many children are disappearing and people are starting to notice. Lyra tries to spy on them and gets caught, and Mrs. Coulter is pissed at everyone. Lyra, the Magisterium, herself, her demon, everyone. After the officials leave, Lyra refuses to remove the handbag that she's been keeping the alethiometer in, and Mrs. Coulter's demon attacks Pan until she submits. Mrs. Coulter accidentally lets slip that Lord Asriel is not Lyra's uncle, but actually her father. Dun dun dun.
Lord Boreal goes to Jordan College on behalf of the Magisterium to investigate the possible heresy and finds out that Lord Asriel and the master of the college have been lying to them about having Grumman's skull. Boreal steps through a portal into another world. Our world's second dun-dun-dun moment. And meets up with a man to ask him to look for Grumman in that world. Mrs. Coulter goes to visit the kidnapped children, tells them she's taking them on an adventure north, and has them write letters to their parents, which she promptly burns. While Mrs. Coulter is gone, Lyra and Pan break into her study and find blueprints for a scary-looking machine that they don't understand. Mrs. Coulter throws a fancy cocktail party, where a journalist pulls Lyra aside and tells her that Mrs. Coulter is in charge of the gobblers who are stealing children. Lord Boreal kills the journalist by squishing her butterfly demon, but Lyra manages to grab the alethiometer and escape from the apartment. Lyra and Pan wander the dark streets of London, and Lyra is attacked and captured by a mysterious dark figure.
First impressions, or overall impressions of the episode?
I thought this episode was fantastic. I was so glad that we finally got to see the relationship between Lyra and Pan and, like, really get that dynamic. We also got a little bit of Lyra's line that I missed a lot last time. And I thought the decision to go into other worlds earlier than in the books was super confident and bold, and I'm so excited to see what they do with that.
I pretty much feel the exact same way about everything. And I feel like everything we talked about last week that we didn't get, we got in this episode. It was fabulous.
That's how I felt about it. That really the previous episode was like a kind of necessary setup for them doing this thing that was probably like more their pitch. We want to kind of like weave all three books together in a way and not only have the other worlds, but we're going to have these really great dynamics between like two characters in a room with their demons, and like everything is like firing exactly the way that, you know, it feels like the writers are in the groove that they want to be in.
Yeah, completely agree. So do we want to go on to favorite parts?
Yes.
So my favorite part was when Lyra first arrives at the Arctic Institute. I thought Daphne Keane was so fucking good in that scene. Like, her excitement and her curiosity were just so delightful, and yeah, it made me really feel like this is the character that I know and love. Mm-hmm. And I also really loved Lyra's line later on.
Did you see the equipment? A blade? To cut what? Where are we, Ben? And what is she? What do you think the master meant about this in my phone? Lord Asriel? Perhaps we've got to keep it safe and give it to him. But wasn't the master going to poison him? I don't think I understand any grown-ups at all.
It was just like such a perfect encapsulation of like that feeling as a child when you're just like, man, you're like starting to realize that adults are fallible, and it's not that everyone is good at their job and knows what they're doing. Like, everyone's a fuck up.
Yeah. My favorite part was how they've really worked in things from later books, both in like the big plot ways with going to other worlds and in much smaller character ways, that it just really shows how much care they're putting into this and how much they really want to do it right. I hesitate in bringing this up because everybody's going to be bringing this shit up. But another book series that HBO was involved with adapting that maybe didn't have an ending, wherein in this one, they have already started foreshadowing parts of the ending. So, and that just gives me a lot of confidence in the show.
Mm.
And it makes me really curious what you're talking about, because I don't remember how the series ends. Or do you mean the end of the book or the end of the series?
Oh, I mean the end of the series. I mean the ending of book 3.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, and that makes me also very excited.
I'm just excited about the way that the show looks. Like, I think it's amazing. A lot of the stuff that we got in some of the trailers comes from this episode, especially like Lord Boreal kind of like kneeling down in the chapel at the college. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and then the master's raven flies over his head. Just the way that whole thing is framed is like exciting just to see that. Or like his demon that's a snake coming out of his sleeve and kind of like slithering all over everything just looks fabulous. I really love the part with like McPhail in the Magisterium, and he's got like that symbol behind him, almost like a halo. Are those horns? Is that a cross? It's, you know, It's just creepy looking, eerie, and just like pitch perfect. Like, just the way the show looks is really fabulous. You know, there's like a scene where like Pan jumps off the bed and then becomes a moth and flies up. And I was like, wow, that was like effortless and perfect. Yeah. That's what I want you to do.
Along those same lines, there's the bit at the end where they're escaping and Ermin Pan jumps off the ledge and is then a bird.
Yeah.
I like that one. Was good too.
That was really good. Like, every time that I watched that, my breath caught. I was like, oh no, Pan. And then he like becomes a bird and I'm like, oh right, yeah, of course. Yes, he did that on purpose.
I do think, and I get why they're doing this, but I do think there are a bunch of scenes where I'm like, Lyra, or like Pan would be on Lyra in that situation. He wouldn't be like walking beside her, but that's more money, I presume, so that's fine.
Oh yeah, having it like interact with the physical bodies is a lot harder in terms of CG.
It all looks really good, though. I think the demons look great in this one.
They do.
And, you know, just by having like only 2 characters in a room or something like that, you get rid of that kind of problem we were having in the previous episode with crowds. It's not, you know, there are crowd scenes in this and it is a problem there, but like I think it's way better than the previous one.
Yeah, especially the cocktail party. They did a good job there with having what I thought was enough animals around.
An appropriate number of demons.
Yeah. The scene with the Egyptians on the boat, there was maybe 1 demon and there was like 6 dudes. I was like, are they all just sitting on the roof? Because that's dumb.
Well, okay. So I thought I noticed in one of the crowd scenes that all of the Egyptians had bird demons. And they all looked very similar. Or maybe it was just a flock of birds happened to be going by, but I thought they were trying to imply that all of the Egyptians had bird demons, which is like a little bit weird and maybe problematic. And also like all of the magisterium people had insect demons.
Why is it problematic?
We talked before about how it's kind of weirdly classist and predetermined to have people's demons, the form of their demons match their occupation. Like, well, I guess if your demon settles as a beetle, you have to go join this death cult.
Yeah, I mean that, and I think the Egyptians like see themselves a certain way and see everyone around them has a bird, and a bird is, you know, you got to go from boat to land.
That's true.
Like,
yeah, it's easier with a bird.
How much of this is how you see yourself and how much of it is actually like determined?
All right, but like we haven't even seen like Ma Costa's demon.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's really weird because we get a lot of emotion from her. So where's her soul? Where's this emotion coming from?
Yeah, you're right.
We haven't seen it at all. We haven't seen Tony's demon since the weird party scene, as far as I remember. Like, it might have been one of the birds that you see. And like Fardakorm does have a cat, so there is at least. Like,
have we seen the autumn cat yet? Maybe it'll be a bird.
He put it down in the
You do see it
alley.
very briefly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for like 1 second.
I guess I wasn't paying enough attention.
But it's super, because I remember I was messaging you guys and I was like, where's the fucking cat? Give it to me.
Yeah.
And then a minute later you do see it and I was like, okay, thank you. Not at all how I pictured it. Least favorite parts.
I did not like the cardinal. He looked to me like he was trying to be a caricature of Lord Varys from Game of Thrones, and it just did not work for me. It was like too aggressively creepy with the weird posture and the voice, and it just ended up looking like silly to me. I don't know. I didn't buy it, considering that everyone else in the Magisterium has looked pretty normal.
I apologize for disturbing you. My needs were too great.
Cardinal.
The General Oblation Board is causing trouble again. A recent Egyptian raid trying to find those damn children.
Did they?
No. Give them credit. The General Oblation Board's policy of moving them constantly and quickly seems to have borne fruit. But they risk so much.
I like the idea of the Cardinal. I could see how the performance and stuff doesn't work for you. But I like the idea that, like, the Magisterium is not, like, vertical. And that's what I like about the Cardinal. We see that it's, like, very fractious. And there's different, you know... McPhail isn't in charge. He has people who can boss him the way that he's bossing Boreal. And so, like, it gives a lot of texture to the Magisterium. So I like that he's there, but I could see how the performance doesn't work for you.
I'm trying to think if I have an actual least favorite bit. But I can't really think of anything, so I will just go with this. But they cut out the best scene from the book when Lyra lies to that dude at the coffee shop about her murderer father.
Oh,
and I will never forgive them for depriving us of that amazing Lyra moment. I like that they had her captured by the singing fox guy who got Billy, and they just cut out the confusing bit where she was captured by not gobblers, and then, like, there was two people in London stealing children.
A much better decision.
Yeah.
For sure.
I don't know that I have a least favorite part, although what you mentioned about Ma Costa not having a demon while she is so upset actually does bother me.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
based on like other stuff that I noticed in this episode.
the demon should be like racing around and like displaying her agitation.
Or trying to comfort her.
Or like cuddling up to
Yeah.
her. Yeah.
Okay.
Or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any problematics with this episode?
So we have the character come in. I can't remember if she's named. We get the reporter, which is really like the first woman of color that we've had in the series with like a serious kind of speaking part, performance part. And I don't like that she is incompetent, where she's just like very like bald faced, just sneaking around. Like, can you get me some documents? Can you like...
The initials you see, General Ablation Board.
Cobbler. She's involved in the...
She is the Ablation Board. It's entirely her own project. You didn't know? Who's that with, Lyra?
She's a journalist.
Well, we need to get her out of here.
I got to go.
Lyra! Papers, letters, anything could be hugely useful. Lyra.
I'm all right. I'm just getting to my...
She's not sneaky at all. And then mainly she's there. I think it's a good bit of writing because it's doing like 2 or 3 things at the same time. But she's mostly a prop to like help us understand how dangerous Boreal and Coulter are and that they work together. Even though he's supposed to be there, presumably to like rein her in. Coulter like basically points out this reporter and says like, take care of it. And Boreal does that. And I don't think it's a great look to have a white woman silencing a woman of color on the show in the second episode. I mean, that's an evil act, but like also like not great.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. Sorry. I don't know why I was hesitating there. I don't really have anything to add, I guess is what I'm saying.
I agree totally with your read on it, but I also think that actress absolutely killed the role. Yeah, she did a great job with not that much on the page.
Yeah.
Like she just had a lot of warmth and like charisma in the role. I mean, I agree with your analysis, but also like, would it be that much better if they gave the role to a white woman? So like that actress didn't have the exposure.
Well, when I point out problematics, I'm not trying to like say it should be done differently or something like that. Mostly I'm trying to inoculate against the unconscious effect that it can have on you. If you notice these things, then it can't kind of reinforce the idea that, yes, white women should be in control of women of color's voices. Like you can notice that and be like, yeah, I got to remember that this is a problem.
That's a good point. For my part in this scene, I was very upset about like a world building thing, so I wasn't paying attention to anything else.
I noticed that too.
But I think I've got that down in our spoilers section so that I can really dive into it. So,
the only other thing, I don't know if this is actually problematic. I kind of like it, and we'll see where it goes. I do think that it's probably unconscious and not on purpose, though. You get Lord Boreal in this episode going through a window into our Oxford, I'm guessing. It sure does seem like our Oxford. And this just made me think of right-wing anxieties that are happening in Britain right now about like brown Islamic immigrants sneaking into the country. I'm just talking about like xenophobia. I'm not talking about like reality. To kind of like change the culture to Sharia law. And you've got Lord Boreal here, who is an operative of the Magisterium, which is a fascist, religious institution sneaking into our world, to expand the influence of the Magisterium, presumably, or at least do its business. And so I think that like on some unconscious level, it would speak to those anxieties, or maybe they're doing it on purpose to kind of like wrestle with these ideas that are current and relevant, but maybe not. I like that it's happening, and I want to see where they go with it. But if they're not doing it on purpose, it's a little bit like, again, you should notice it and be like, xenophobia is bad.
I agree with that.
That xenophobia is bad?
Yep. I think we
it's
can.
Controversial.
It is a little controversial, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really see it as like immigration in that sense, just because his accent is the same, right? And he's like clearly so comfortable, like he has a car and a phone and all of that. That's like not really the image. He's so classy. He looks posh as fuck, is what I'm saying.
No,
and
yeah.
Like, the like xenophobic immigrant thing. It's like they're not wearing beautiful woolen coats.
Lord Boreal has great hair, by the way.
Yes,
I love his hair.
he does.
He looks so good.
100%. All right, shall we dive into the meat? I don't.
No, I don't want to do that.
Are you insulting our conversation this far?
No, not at all. I'm sorry. I don't even know how to really go from here. So that was
So I think you wanted to talk about Miss Coulter, and I had some other things that I also wanted to talk about Mrs. Coulter. So
this
why don't
is
you
true.
Start?
Mrs. Coulter in this show is the best, and I love her.
Just like in the book, she's also the best, and you also love her.
Yes. Now, this is not to be saying that I agree with what she's doing. I just think she's a very well-written character, and I love what they're doing with her in this show, with making her a lot more human and a less boogeyman.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of moments in this episode where she shows like genuine emotional vulnerability in a way that we never get to see in the book. And so they're kind of doing the same thing with both Lord Asriel and Mrs. Coulter, which makes so much sense, I think, with TV being a visual medium and you like want your actors to be able to give the characters more depth and complexity that it's harder to do in like a close third person like book narration where we're just like so close to Lyra the whole time and we don't get that insight either like visual or otherwise into Asriel and Mrs. Coulter.
I love just that one scene where Lyra flops onto her bed and Mrs. Coulter stands at the doorway and looks in at her. And Ruth Wilson is just amazing. Like just looking at her, but you can see so much and it's fabulous. It's so good.
I also really loved the scene when they're done with the bath and she's just kind of like sitting there pondering and then suddenly like comes to her senses. And there's like so much just like under the surface there,
I love how she yanks out that plug. She looks all like hurt and wistful and then all of a sudden like she goes hard and she's just like, Jah,
yeah,
get out of there, water.
Yeah, exactly. You can tell there's just like so much under the surface.
I do wish the monkey was a little creepier.
I love the way they had it facing the wall though. Like that's so visually striking.
That was good.
I think it like says something about, like the way that demons interact with humans that are not their humans and like modesty and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So that's
what I took it as.
Okay. That the monkey should not look at Lyra because she's naked in the tub.
That was how I interpreted it. Did you interpret it differently?
No, I like that. I saw it as a piece of like this larger relationship between Mrs. Coulter and the monkey. When you compare it to Lyra and Pan, who are often like cuddling with each other or are just affectionate. And then Coulter and the monkey are very the opposite. That monkey looks like it's ashamed of itself. It's kind of like looking over its shoulder and like, oh, I wish that I was involved in this nice thing. It seems like on a certain level, because the demons are that Lyra loves herself on some level and that Mrs. Coulter hates herself. On another level.
I like that.
Do you know what I mean?
Read of it. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yes.
Well, and the way she slaps the demon in this episode, it's like, that's how you know she's evil.
Man, it's so Mrs. Coulter is so fucking good. Because like the thing about this abusive person too is that just how fragile she is. She has this front that she's putting so much energy into, to the point where like anything that can crack through that, like anything that makes her angry enough or like surprises her enough, then she just like shatters and she becomes a complete mess. And that's exactly how it is for abusive people, especially like abusive parents, where they have like an idea of what the child should do so that the parent, feels safe in that situation. And when the child like steps outside of those boundaries, then they like lose their mind and become abusive. And she's like the picture of that.
So Ruth Wilson deserves an Emmy.
Oh yeah.
And that's all there is to that. She's amazing.
Do we give Emmys to British TV shows? Is that a thing that happens?
It's airing on HBO, so I don't see why you wouldn't. I don't know enough about award shows, though, to make that a BAFTA then. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah. So maybe while we're on the topic of Miss Coulter, we should also just talk a little bit about the dad reveal, because it happens differently in the show than it does in the book. And I think that was an amazing adaptive choice.
It was very good.
Yeah.
You can't treat me like this. My uncle won't let you.
When has that man ever done anything for you?
He's done everything.
He's done nothing! He's a failure of a man and a failure of father!
I love the way that Ruth Wilson plays it, where she looks surprised at herself.
Yeah.
And they're both like startled. And one of the really good things about that is the degree to which she is constantly like gaslighting and lying to Lyra. And then it's when she gets very emotional and so furious that the truth comes out.
Yeah.
Like she loses control and says the true thing. And the true thing like stuns everybody.
And it just ends the fight immediately. Mm-hmm. That's why part of me was wondering, like, did she do that on purpose just to like get Lyra to stop whatever she was doing? But I went back and watched it again, and no, I think it's pretty clear that it's an accident.
I also thought it was an accident. And just from a storytelling perspective, I'm glad that they're breaking up Lyra finding out the backstory of her life instead of it all just getting dumped on us all at once.
Yeah, well, and exposition dumps work particularly poorly, I think, in a TV medium versus a book. Because, like, just having one character sit and yammer on for minutes and minutes can be... Yeah. I mean, it can be done well, but it's hard.
Well, I had assumed that they were going to do, like, a flashback. But I guess maybe they won't. Who knows? Okay, you know what? Let's talk about what we think about the windows and crossing over into our world. Yes. Which did not happen at all in the book. And I think it's hilarious.
So good. Because
in the spoiler section last week, we were talking about how we were wondering how they were going to do the windows. And then we were like, oh, shit, okay.
It's funny, too, how they set up the scene, because there's, like, he's, like, very slowly and deliberately walking up the stairs, and there's, like, a ton of cinematographic attention on, like, his shoes and the leaves crumbling, and, like... And honestly, the first time through, I was like, what the fuck is going on with these stairs? Like, this seems like undue attention. I almost actually missed the window thing. And I had to, like, go rewind and go back and be like, wait, what is happening?
He goes from one step to the other and, like, he steps through and his foot doesn't come through the other side. And I was like, oh, what a cool visual choice. Like, you don't have to say anything. Like, you get it right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm of two minds about the look of the window, because it looks great and it shows you clearly what it is and how it works, the way that they've done it. But, like, the whole point of the windows in the book is that they're kind of just hidden everywhere and you can just accidentally find one. But if they've all got that, like, glowy stuff around the edge, they're not very hidden. Like, I don't know. So it's an interesting design choice, and I don't really see how in a visual perspective they could have done it any other way. But it'll be interesting to see how certain people may or may not discover them later. Anyways, that's my non-spoilery discussion there.
I did like the kind of mirroring effect that it has as he's like about to go through. You see like 3 or 4 images of him as if there's some kind of distortion going on. And then when he crosses over and he's like at a cafe or something, they do a similar effect with him sitting there, and we're kind of looking at him through the glass wall of the cafe, and there's like 3 or 4 kind of images of him, and I was like, oh, neat. Like this is like a thing for the show, a look.
I love how excited that guy is about his demon and how irritated he is by the other guy's excitement, because you know that is exactly how we would act if we ever ran into somebody with a demon.
Yes, exactly.
There's been some complications back home.
Scary things, fun things, interesting things. Nothing you're going to tell me.
You have better coffee than we do.
Where's the snake?
We don't always feel the need to have our demons on show all the time, Thomas.
2 worlds both alike in so many ways, and you only seem to care about what this world can do for yours. You might be better to think about what your world can do for this one. Now he comes out.
She. And I don't pay you to advise me.
Just before that, when he's like looking for Grumman's skull in the crypt. Okay, so he finds the skull, and the skull has a hole in it. I am not particularly knowledgeable about trepanning, but that is a giant fucking hole.
It's about the size that I had imagined. I don't know.
I don't think they make that big of a hole. Like, you could,
I have no idea.
You could fit 2 fingers in there. I think they just like scrape a little bit away. You know, when they were just using like a rock to scrape away some of your skull, they're not going to cut that big of a hole. Anyways,
It's a big hole.
It was a giant fucking hole.
I'm looking up images of it now, and it seems like about the right size.
Really?
Based on the assorted selection of pictures that come up when you Google search trepanning.
I don't know if I want to do that to myself. But like, how do you live through that? That's fucking crazy. That was a giant hole, and I was not okay.
The biggest danger, right, is like infection. And I don't think the size of the hole really maybe has that big of an impact on it. Like, as soon as you open up the brain cavity, you're kind of in trouble already.
I feel like another big danger is whatever you're using to carve the skull away hitting the brain. And the bigger the hole, the higher the potential for that. Anyways, the idea that Boreal immediately knew that this skull was not Grumman.
I don't think he knew immediately. I think the demon had some sort of like mystical connection to it.
I have thoughts about that, but we can't talk about them here.
Okay, so this is based on book knowledge, but I was thinking, like, what if there was some kind of like demon coin underneath the skull, and they knew that it wasn't Grumman, they knew who it was, and then they put the proper coin there, and that was what the demon was using. I don't know.
Huh.
Just a random thought that I had based on book knowledge.
Maybe, I don't see, if it was a random person, though, like, why would it have been somebody from the college who's the only
that's true.
type of people, like, or Azrael could have just found somebody in the north and murdered them.
Would not be surprised.
When you need a head, you need a head. Either way, it just made me think of Shakespeare and, when Hamlet finds the skull and how it must be a very particular looking skull in order to know who it belongs to or who it does not belong to. Okay, I have a bone to pick. So we see the Costa boat, and Tony is wearing, an old crappy stained t-shirt. Ma Costa, who's I believe they called her Maggie in this. I think I said something like Margaret last week. And she's wearing, tattered overalls, and they look not the best quality clothes. But then this very distinctive sweater that they find that belongs to Billy is what is presumably a hand-knit vest. Like, that shit takes time and effort. Why does he get this one, like everybody else's clothes looked very threadbare and thin, and he alone has this sweater.
'Cause he's a nerd. Did you see the glasses? And he needs the sweater vest to go with his glasses.
I'm just saying, that was like some Fair Isle knitting. It was a work of love, that sweater. And Tony didn't get that. Maggie Costa obviously has a favorite.
I was going to say, don't you think that means that he's the favorite? Yeah.
I mean, okay, because children are smaller, so you can, afford the good yarn, but in small quantities.
That is actually true.
I know.
Also, for a tick in the favor of Billy being the favorite, I'm pretty sure they've got different dads, so...
Well, and also, Billy was the only one who has a portrait on the wall.
Yeah. That was also, drawn, I'm pretty sure. So that's another artistry that he gets.
Yeah, I think he's definitely the favorite.
Yeah.
That's why she's so busted up. She would be like, why couldn't it have been you? It would be like, what, Mom? No, never mind. I didn't mean that.
Yeah, if Tony had been the one taken, none of this would be happening, because Mom Costa would be like, yeah, that's fine. I've still got Billy.
Well, I did notice, with what you're saying with Egyptians there, on their costumes and stuff, I really appreciate, the look of the ships, how industrial they are. You can see, the rivets behind people and stuff like that. And, the colors that they choose for them are all, browns and greens, very earthy. And they've got, these long coats and stuff. So they all, look of a piece. And you get, the same kind of thing for Jordan College, which is lots of red colors, deep browns. It's very warm there, We just barely go back there for a second, but, the master of Jordan College is wearing purple. It's very dark, warm colors like that. And the whole setting there at the college is, medieval. And then, the magisterium is all, grays and blues. And Mrs. Coulter is in blue, and she's dressing Lyra in blue. And so you're getting this transition from, in the previous episode, she had a red dress, and now she's shifted to blue, and Mrs. Coulter is blue is your color.
Well, I think she's just saying that because blue is her color. I do love, though, the mirroring of them. I mean, Mrs. Coulter puts Lyra in basically the little girl version of the same outfit that she's wearing. She's definitely, trying to mold her in that way.
And she's also bringing her into that magisterial culture. Because even Lord Boreal's suits are blue. And the priests are wearing blue and blue accents and stuff like that. So everything is blue or gray, in that world. And it's I love just all the attention to detail in terms of the costuming and the settings. I really love the Art Deco stuff with Mrs. Coulter's penthouse and the use of Art Deco. There's the one scene when she is getting that dress, it's shot through a gate that's this Art Deco kind of abstract shape gate that makes it look like a highly stylized prison, a gilded cage that Lyra is in. Just subtle stuff like that just really works for me. And you contrast that with our world, with the contemporary architecture. Like I said, you're looking at the cafe through the windows. So the buildings are made of glass instead of the Art Deco, metal and stuff like that. And everybody's dressed in all different kinds of colors and stuff. It's not as well defined and segmented off as Lyra's world.
I also love, just because of the way that the episode breaks happen, Lyra ends up having a very different style in every episode. Right, so like the first episode was like very kind of casual, not very fashionable academic outfits. And then this episode, everything was like super tailored and well made, and like very classy. And then I'm assuming next episode, low-key spoiler, is going to be more like ratty, hand-me-down type outfits. And so I wonder like how long they're going to be able to keep this up of just like a completely different Lyra aesthetic every single episode.
That's a good point.
I just need them to get to the bit where she has the red hat so that I can see a good high def picture of it, because the knitting of this hat makes no sense to me.
Oh yeah.
It's like an uneven rib. Who makes that choice?
I don't even know what that means.
Caitin's got that deep knitting knowledge
It's
going
not that
on.
deep.
But you'll notice even there, it's a red hat in the way that links back to Jordan College and the coloring that's all happening there.
Kate, if I buy you fancy red yarn, will you make us all matching Lyra hats that we can wear while we podcast this winter?
See, the making of the hats isn't a problem. It's the going to the post office, getting an envelope, mailing them to you. Like, I can make 3 red hats, easy peasy, but you'll get them in about 2 years when I remember to go to a post office.
Okay.
Speaking of needing a good shot of something, I need a good shot of all the symbols on the fucking alethiometer, because we do not have like a good high def front on thing. And unlike in other interpretations of the alethiometer in an artistic way, the way that they've kind of like carved the pictures in instead of having them be miniature paintings, some of them are very hard to figure out. And it's very annoying for me when I'm trying to figure out what fucking symbol the needle landed on after Lyra asked what Asriel was doing, or where Asriel was, or whatever. I forget what the question was, because I needed to know where it landed. So,
I need help. Tell me what she is. Tell me where Roger is. Tell me where my Lord Asriel is. Why didn't he tell me who he really was? Please. Tell me anything. Please, something.
And actually, while we're on the topic of the alethiometer, she kind of got it to work.
yes, yeah. It responded.
After like many times of trying to get it to work and failing, she actually got the needles to move this time, but I don't think she noticed.
No, because she threw it away.
Yeah.
Now,
Her eyes were closed, yeah.
okay, from what I could tell, when she threw it away, the question needles, or whatever, were on the helmet and the globe, and then one of them was kind of in between the chameleon and the sword. Now, when she throws it away and the answer needle swings, it is, of course, out of fucking focus. But I could tell which symbol was the compass, because that's just a very distinct symbol, and it landed on the one that was 2 like counterclockwise, like 2 slots counterclockwise from the compass. So, after comparing many, many, many things and watching the opening credits a lot last night, I narrowed it down to probably being either the marionette or the wild man, because I think I saw feet. I could be wrong. There were a couple other ones that it could be, and I had like a whole list of the things that it definitely wasn't, and I put way too much work into this last night.
I was going to say, we can tell who the overachiever is on this podcast.
I just wanted to know.
So, based on where the question needles were, does that match up to any of the questions that get explained in the book?
Okay, so, hold on. What did I say? I said it was on helmet and globe, right? Definitely?
Yeah, helmet, globe, and something else.
So, the globe is politics, sovereignty, and fame. And the helmet...
I mean, that's Asriel.
Means war, protection, and narrow vision.
Asriel.
Yeah, so from my 2 guesses on where it landed, if it is the wild man, and that seems to be the one that makes the most sense as an answer, the meaning being like number 1 is just wild man, and then masculinity and lust.
I mean, that's definitely why they took it out of focus, right? Because of this. Like, what does it mean? What does it say?
I thought it was more just like, if Lyra doesn't get to know the answer, we don't get to know the answer.
Right.
But yeah, I'm sure I will get one of these close-up pictures with everything in focus eventually and be able to figure out what it actually is, and then I'll feel good.
I have a question for you, Kate. Is the alethiometer how you pictured it?
No, but I think they did that on purpose, because the one in the bad movie was pretty much exactly how I pictured it. And
it's bigger, right? And like...
It looks more like a tool and less like something an artist made, if that makes any sense. You know, it looks more industrial.
Yeah. This one's more Art Deco style, which is like very... And industrial is the exact right word, because like Art Deco is all about like mass-produced art. Not that the alethiometer was mass-produced, but it like fits in with that aesthetic.
But again, I think they did that on purpose because they were trying very hard not to...
Be the movie.
To not look exactly like the movie.
It's good to make it all feel like one world. Since they've changed the look of the world, you know, compared to the book, like everything needs to be changed a little bit. Because we've got like cars and all of this stuff that wasn't in the book. Like basically it seems like technology has progressed like 30 years from what was portrayed in the book.
Since 30 years has passed in real life.
Right.
Anyways, I just want to know where all the fucking symbols on this thing are. Now, let's move on and not talk about the alethiometer for a very long time. Or at least until next week.
I did want to stay on my Moses equals Lyra bit from last time. Because I think we keep going with that, with Lyra kind of getting taken in by Mrs. Coulter, and the way that Moses was taken in by Pharaoh's daughter and like given the richest clothes and a really good education, and basically like made one of the elite people in Egypt, ancient Egypt. And it's not until Moses sees one of the slave masters beating a Hebrew that he like becomes incensed and attacks the slave master to save the Hebrew person and kills him. And then that like ends up getting him kicked out of the Egyptian family and he has to run. And it's when Lyra finds these documents about the oblation board and realizes what Mrs. Coulter is in charge of and just, you know, who she's with and how dangerous all of this is, that she needs to run away. So there's continues to be parallels between Moses and Lyra in terms of like adapting a story.
Okay, so here's a really difficult question. If you could answer without any foreknowledge, why do you think Mrs. Coulter took Lyra in? Just from watching this episode, and I guess the previous episode.
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, okay, just based on like the information that we have so far, remember the like text across the screen in episode 1 that you hated that talks about the prophecy of the girl who will become really, or the child who will become really important. I mean, maybe Mrs. Coulter, we can assume that Mrs. Coulter has some foreknowledge that Lyra is the child involved in this prophecy and wants her for that reason.
That's true.
Yeah, because right away we get this lunch at the Arctic place, and that is where it says the prophecy comes from. And she seems to be in pretty tight with people from up there. So, you know, and she's involved with children. We don't know what that whole thing about the children is about. Maybe she is looking for the prophesied one.
That's a good point, actually. I do love that bit when they're at the Arctic Institute and Lyra's just a complete fangirl.
Yeah.
It's so good.
That's really good.
Is that the Skraeling who mapped the currents of the Great Northern Ocean?
Hello, Eliza.
You know him?
Of course. Now come, Lyra.
Oxford only had so much, but this...
Now, what will you eat?
I don't care about food.
Well, you might care about food if you were starving.
Is that an armoured bear skull? I've heard so much about them.
Lyra. Lyra. Sit down.
I remember when they cut out the talking about the bears in the first episode, I remember thinking to myself, Lyra needs all that knowledge. How is she going to get it? But then they very quickly were like, no, she's just a fangirl of the North. She knows it. I'm like, okay, I buy that, actually. That's cool.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, just with the writing and the acting in this episode, I totally buy that Mrs. Coulter wanted to keep Lyra safe from accidentally getting taken. And that's why she was like, no, I'm going to get this person into my apartment and nobody will take her then.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. But because she, like, is out there, she knows there's people out and about kidnapping children who they think won't be noticed, and Lyra exactly fits that description.
Yeah. And, like, what her reasons for caring about Lyra are in particular, the show hasn't gone into yet, but I do buy that she has, like, a strange affection for her. While it's obviously mixed in with some other not great feelings and other random stuff.
I like that she genuinely does seem to care about Lyra. That is something that I think is essential to the way that this toxic relationship operates. There might be like a temptation to turn these adults into like Matilda's parents, from the book Matilda.
Yeah.
And just have them be monstrous, which you can do and would probably work. But to have this very much more complicated kind of character in Mrs. Coulter where, she comes back for Lyra and, she has to do that whole thing of like getting out of the office and pretending like she was reading the whole time. And Mrs. Coulter's monkey comes in and pets Pan.
Yeah.
I think there's a way to do that where that is like a domination thing, like you will be submissive to me, and maybe there's a little bit of that going on, but I do genuinely think that is like, oh, you obediently sat here this whole time and did the thing that I want you to do. I love you now. And there's like a genuine, really fucked up kind of affection, but it's an affection that's going on.
It's given her a complexity and given their relationship a complexity that, while you might have been able to like read between the lines and find it in the book, it wasn't like explicitly in the book. So I like that.
While we're talking about Miss Coulter,
I was going to say again.
Yeah.
We can't stop.
While we're talking about Miss Coulter again, can we talk about that scene with her and Roger?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
It's really good.
'Cause like Roger clearly recognizes her and is trying to like, not necessarily like extract something from her, but just be like, I know you and I know you know Lyra. And Mrs. Coulter is kind of going along with it, but also like not making any promises. And then actually, I mean, the monkey slap is when you know it emotionally, but that moment is when you know it intellectually, that like she's definitely up to no good.
Yeah.
I thought that scene was just really well done. And
I like that Roger tried to get a message to Lyra, but also, why would he think that letter was going to be delivered? I don't know.
They took that element, which is in the book, of like doing the letters and then burning them, and they shifted it to be something a little bit different here, because I think that the whole reason that she goes in there and does that is to sound out Roger, to like find him. We're going to sign each of these letters with our name and like,
right.
Oh, you're Roger. Okay. Now I know which one of you is Roger. And then, but in the book, she does it so that the children will trust her, and then she burns them so that we know as readers to like, oh, she's fucked up and evil.
Mm-hmm. But do you think she's marked him in some way?
Yeah, I just think it's like a really good use of something from the book. It did get me thinking about the choice that they're making there, because in the book, what we get is dramatic irony. Like, we know that there's a lady out there with a golden monkey kidnapping kids. And then we see Mrs. Coulter with a golden monkey and we're like, oh no, Lyra. But they're not doing that in the show. Instead, this is a twist reveal that we get in this episode that, we didn't know that she was in charge of this thing until she shows up to get the letters from these kids. And then that's like the 100% confirmation that she's in charge of all of this, which is simultaneously happening with Lyra discovering the documents and all of that stuff. So that is like a reveal moment. So they traded out the dramatic irony for the twist. And I think it's actually a weaker choice, the way that Anya was saying last time, that this isn't that big of a twist. They telegraphed it a lot.
I don't know if twist is the word. Like again, I don't think it's a surprise, even if you haven't read the books. I think maybe what they're trying to do is have the audience's journey mirror Lyra's journey.
Yeah.
I mean, I also think it just makes more sense logistically that Mrs. Coulter isn't kidnapping individual children by herself. It seems like something that she would delegate.
It seems like something she would delegate, except it also seems like something she would enjoy. So I can see where, 90% of the time she would delegate, but sometimes she'd be like, yeah, I'm going to go get that one just for fun.
Well, and I think you can't actually watch this relationship deteriorate in the same way if you have that dramatic irony hanging over your head from the beginning of this episode, when they're like sitting next to each other eating breakfast and like so warm and nice with each other, to the point where, at the end of the episode, they're sitting across from each other and Lyra is like stabbing her eggs as if to murder them. And there's a lot of
I didn't even notice that like breakfast tubey.
Yeah, it's just like the blocking of that, shifts to mirror their emotional relationship. My point is like that is breaking down, and to have Lyra sitting next to her and we know 100% for sure that she's kidnapping kids would be a different kind of tension, but wouldn't get us invested, exactly like you're saying, Caitlin, in that journey that Lyra's on. We're riding along with her, where things start out good and end really bad.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad because I think in the first episode, I talked too candidly about Mrs. Coulter being evil, and I wish that I had like slow rolled that a little more, but whoops.
So we did get some of Lyra lying in this episode, but I feel like none of them were believed.
Yeah.
Which is a big, except for maybe when she's talking, when she brings up dust and Pan realizes that the monkey's having a different reaction than Mrs. Coulter is having.
Yes, electrons. Now, the thing about electrons is that they
are negatively charged particles, sort of like dust. But dust might not be charged.
Dust?
From space dust. That dust. You see, I do know some things.
What do you know about dust, Lyra?
It comes from space. It lights people up if you have a special camera to see it by. And... yes. It doesn't affect children.
Who did you learn this from?
Just a visiting scholar from New Denmark who came to Jordan. He was talking to the chaplain and I was passing by. I couldn't help but listen. Is it right? Well, he told me.
Well, I'm sure you know much more about it than I do. Now, let's get back to these electrons.
By the way, I did love that moment when Pan kind of communicates this to Lyra and Lyra realizes she has to lie. That was very well done.
Yeah.
Mrs. Coulter might have believed that one. I don't know. But all the other ones were just like fun stories, and Mrs. Coulter almost immediately shot them all down.
Yeah.
And I just think it's important that we see Lyra lying and people believing her, and I don't think they're doing that quite right.
They might be going in a different direction. This might not be a part of her capability as a character. And they might be trying to do something more realistic in terms of like the psychological sophistication of the adults around her. She's not playing the innocent kid who she can pull the wool over their eyes, which would be a very different Lyra.
Or maybe it's a skill that she's going to develop.
Maybe. I just,
She better hurry
we can
up.
revisit this. Yeah. We can revisit this conversation in the spoilers. Was there anything else that we wanted to say about the episode?
I had some philosophical nonsense because I saw so much stuff with the demons, and because last time I was saying how like I don't always picture things the way that they say them in the book, and I got to admit that like with the demons, they're kind of like, if they're not talking, they're like not there when I was imagining the book. And so to have them embodied here to the degree that they are, like, I think I'm understanding a little bit better what Pullman was going for. You know, when we did our book discussion, I was talking about like Rene Descartes, who said, I think, therefore I am. And like the difference between, your mind and your body are not the same thing. And like, they're kind of separate, different, fundamentally different materials. And I don't think that that's actually what Pullman is going for, because the demons are bodies. Like, we definitely see that with the reporter who gets killed by her demon getting crushed, her butterfly. It has a body, it can be hurt. And we see that in the scene where the monkey wrestles down Pan and hurts Pan. So these are bodies, you know, that have like material feelings. And I think that that's really important to Pullman, that we are like embodied creatures. We are not spirits or minds, which made me think of one of my favorite philosophers who came right after Descartes and was very interested in everything that Descartes had to say, who is Spinoza, a Sephardic Jew who lived in Amsterdam. And Sephardic Jew just means that he's from Spain, and the Spanish Inquisition was going on, and one of the big jobs of the Spanish Inquisition was to hunt down Jewish people and get rid of them because they weren't Christian. And so that's why Spinoza and his family weren't living in Spain anymore. But he got excommunicated from the Jewish community while he was living there because he believed that there is no difference between your mind and your body. Everything is one thing, and that the Bible is just a story, and that the conceptualization of God is like having a voice or a hand or a human personality is like ridiculous. And so Spinoza's idea of God is that the entire universe collectively, from the beginning of time until the end of time, and everything that exists in it right now, is what God is. The everything of everything is God. And so if you want to know what the thoughts of God are, they include your thoughts. And so therefore, there's no difference really between your mind and your body. They're not different things. They're just two versions of you, like your right arm and your left arm are different from each other, but they're still you. Pan is not exactly the same thing as Lyra, but Pan and Lyra are definitely one thing. And this is called like psychophysical parallelism. This is like a complicated term for mind-body parallelism. You could think of it like the way that Spinoza thought of it was that your mind and your body are perfectly synchronized the way that your shadow would be perfectly synchronized to you. It moves in exactly the same way that you do without any effort. Now, that's not like exactly the same kind of thing as Pan and Lyra. But they're generally on the same page in terms of like their knowledge. They might be thinking about different things, but they know all the same stuff and kind of like perceive the same things.
Right. Everything that I have to say about this is based on book 3.
It's not his. So I'm not thinking of like his conception of God as being the same, but just his conception of like, there's nothing else but bodies out there. Like that was Spinoza's big thing. Like everybody's like, oh, there's a heaven and there's spirits and souls. And Spinoza was like, that's trash. The only thing that there is like stars and earth and meat and stuff, you know, like we're not,
right.
There's not like ghosts. There's nothing spooky about God or supernatural. In fact, he didn't even call God God. He just called it nature, like capital N nature. So I think that Pullman would be like on board with that.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me. Although the biologist in me, like the physical presence of demons seems problematic for a functioning society in some ways, right? Because if killing someone's demon can kill the person, or does kill the person, then that's bad news for all those magisterium dudes with insect demons, because, like, some animals are way more fragile than other animals.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking
And,
that,
like,
too. That guy has, like, a giant wasp or something, and I was like,
yeah.
yo, I'd have that thing in, like, a globe or something. Like,
yeah. Like, I wonder in this world, like, what proportion of all deaths come from, like, damage to human versus damage to demon.
like my butterfly got caught in a car door, and I'm like, well, I guess you're dead.
Yeah, it just seems like not that helpful for longevity.
I mean, if a world really did have demons, it probably would have evolved, like, culturally wise, very different than ours, which obviously Philip Pullman just hasn't done in these books.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's that.
Yeah.
Shall we wrap up our non-spoilery section?
I think so. So that wraps up all the non-spoilery stuff we have to say about episode 2. If you want to avoid spoilers, now's the time to say goodbye. If you like our show, please take some time to leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. I'm Anya, and you can follow me on Twitter at StrangelyLiteral. That's strangely, then Literl.
I'm Caitlin, and you can follow me on Twitter at InferiorCaitlin.
Follow the show on Twitter at MOTPod, so you can live tweet Monday night on HBO at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Need more than 280 characters to speak your mind? Send your email to contact@hallowedgroundmedia.com.
And now, on to the spoilers.
Everyone special!
The conversation about heights. So good. I loved it so much. I'm not going to say any more than that because Anya doesn't remember things. But it made me so happy.
Okay.
That is putting in these little character touches that are going to come to a really big head in the third book, in the third season. And I love it.
Speaking of heights, I thought it was interesting that they had her climbing through the, like, ceiling venting, because in the book that obviously happens later on once she's at the station. So I'm wondering if they're going to, like, do something else there or have it again and have it be, like, become Lyra's thing. It's just crawling through the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
I did also notice that. So Boreal squishes the demon and then opens his hand and the demon is still there. That is problematic for the fucking plot.
Maybe it takes them a while to vanish.
Maybe.
I thought it was going to, like,
Dust.
discorporate into dust. Yeah, in his hand, and then it, like, didn't happen. And I was like, weird.
We get to make a Buffy reference.
Yeah.
But that is extremely problematic. Again, I would almost not be worried about it if they hadn't started foreshadowing book 3 things already. But because they have, I'm like, what? This, like, the whole plot of book 3 relies on demons fucking disappearing when you die.
Yeah. They can fix that. It can just be, like, an oversight. But yeah, it was definitely, I was watching for it, and I was like, huh, weird.
And again, just, like, something that kind of bothered me, because we have all this stuff with the Magisterium, and I don't know if this is an actual spoiler, but they're leaving out so much religion and mentions of God that, like, they weren't in really the Golden Compass, but because they've introduced the Magisterium so early and everything, it's a weird absence to have, considering where the story has to go, because, like, the subtext is very quickly going to become text. I think that is also a Buffy reference.
Yes.
Like, book 2, we're going to have actual angels, and we're going to talk to them about things.
Right.
Wait, really? There are angels in that book? How do I remember none of this? I mean, I guess I was like 14, but still.
I like that it's not too supernatural yet. I like what they're really focusing on with Magisterium is that they're like an institution, that they're like government. And so they're really worried about what people are doing. Are they following our rules or doing what we want them to do in exactly the way that we want them to do it? I actually really like that, and that they're not bringing up God too much, because they're like, they're doing business.
One of the things that I found creepiest about the Magisterium in the books, like for an example, in book 3, Father McPhail sends another high up person, like a father person, I don't know, whatever, somebody in the Magisterium to assassinate Lyra.
Mm-hmm.
But he makes sure that, this is somebody who's, I forget what the actual thing is called, but like he is punished himself for this sin. So he's still good with God. And that is something that Father McPhail is like worried about for him. Like he's like, yes, we want to make sure you're good. You're still good. Heaven is still your place. You're just going to go kill this little girl.
Right. Which was a real thing, by the way.
Yeah.
You could do that. You could get forgiveness for something you haven't done yet. That's totally a Catholic thing in the medieval period.
And I think, A, that makes them creepier. And B, it's just sort of part of who they are and a part of what's going on in the world and the story. And I think it's weird that they're leaving that out.
In the first episode, like I saw them and I was like, who are these guys? But then there was the thing in this one where he was like, I don't drink tea. And I was like, oh, I remember
Monster.
You. You're that guy.
Would you like some tea?
Thank you. I don't drink tea.
No, of course you don't.
I meant to bring this up in our non-spoiler section, but Father McPhail is played by Daphne Keene's actual father.
What?
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
And I think that's hilarious.
That is hilarious.
And I guess that makes sense that you know his name because he's an actual character in books that are not the one book that I've read recently.
Yes. So I just think that that's weird. Oh, and the dude that's talking to Lord Boreal, I wonder if that's the one that we're going to see.
Yeah.
Will kill at the beginning of the Subtle Knife, because that'll be cool. Not that Will kills him, but I just like that they're bringing in season 2 so early. It makes me very happy.
Oh yeah, that which reminds me, like the snake goes in there and then immediately Boreal's like, well, that's not him. And I was like, did he like see some fillings in his teeth or like the absence of such things and was like, nope, not him. Like dental records don't match or something like that.
I have no idea what they were going for there when he puts his hand on the skull and is like, it's not him. I'm like, what? How? How do you know that? I'm interested to see if they explain why Mrs. Coulter's demon can go so far away from her. For people who've read the books, I have not finished The Secret Commonwealth yet. I have started it, but the beginning is a bit of a big old downer. So I'm not getting very far. But I do know that book is very much about people who can separate from their demons. So I'm interested to see if they work any of that in.
Oh, so there's a reason why Mrs. Coulter might be able to get far away from her demon, and it's not that they've been cut. Nurses and caretakers who are looking after the children who have been cleaved from their demons have that like kind of spacey, weird, distant personality. And I thought that the actress in this episode actually did a really good job of being like little bit uncanny, but not super uncanny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was good.
And so, yeah, I was confused how the monkey could get that far away from Miss Coulter without being a space cadet.
There are ways to do this that have nothing to do with severing.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yes, that's the word, not cleaving.
Yeah, I thought she was good too. And I didn't even notice that first time, but the second time, the first time I watched the episode, but the second time I watched it, I was like, oh wait, that's one of the people from the station, so she might be. Anyway, so I took special note of her.
Yeah.
And it was good to see.
But anyway, Lyra was mistaken. The monkey wasn't there. It was behind her the whole time.
Right, of course, she was just asleep.
Yeah.
Sleepwalking.
She didn't know.
Yeah, of course. I'm interested to see where they're taking that storyline since it wasn't in the book at all.
Yeah, maybe they will be changing Mrs. Coulter's knowledge capabilities in terms of like her cultural knowledge to be less problematic. So we're not doing Deepest Darkest Africa, we're doing other kind of
right. I see.
Maybe.
Oh, I forgot
Maybe.
about all of that deepest, darkest Africa shit in the book. I'm glad we're avoiding all that.
Well, I'm not saying that we are, but
Oh.
like those, if she can send the monkey far away, then that's like a different knowledge, area. That's not a deepest, darkest Africa thing. So
It's what witches can
Right.
do. So
Oh, yeah. But she's not a witch, probably.
and there's other stuff in the books. This is like, straight up magic stuff too. So like, who knows?
yeah, let's wrap it up.
Do you like my sign-off?
I mean, I liked my idea better, but yours is fine.
Of just being like, everyone is special.
Yeah, every single time.
And remember, everyone is special!
I see like Kermit the Frog freaking out kind of
Yes.
thing in my head
Yes.
when you do that.
Yes. That was very Kermit in the best way. All right, so that is our episode for this week. We will see you all next week for episode 3. And remember, don't let your whispers become weapons in the wrong hands. And everyone is special.
And everyone is special.